Nuttycast.
All right. Welcome back to season 2 of the Nuttycast. I am live from Doug Moister's back porch.
My third home.
Third home, all right. Doug Moister is a longtime buddy. I met him at Renew whenever you started showing up there, 2011-ish.
Yeah, 2011.
And actually, my first thought when you came along was, who is this guy? Why, why, why is he stepping in on JR's toes? I don't like him. But I digress. Doug's been a long-time Nutty customer. His daughter worked for us for a time, Kylie, doing recipes and stuff like that. I have a sense that she might be back with us at some point down the road. And his son is named Caleb as well. His son is actually driving for us a couple of days a week right now, so you might see him on the road in the summer. But what I want to talk with Doug about today mostly is that, so he has started his own small business.
Mm-hmm.
And it's called Bending Branches.
Yep.
And he does spiritual direction. So, Doug, why don't you start us off? What on earth is spiritual direction, and why should I care?
It's a great question. Well, the short answer is spiritual direction is two people listening to God together. And essentially, it is an opportunity for a conversation where one person is lovingly listening to the other as we are both listening to God, providing clarity and deepening friendship with Jesus. So I like to look at it in terms of, if you look at the helping ministries like counseling and coaching and spiritual direction, counseling is very much about healing past wounds, not all the time, but essentially it's looking back. Spiritual direction, I'll go to coaching. Coaching is about looking forward. How do I get to this goal or do this particular thing? And spiritual direction is really about present. Where do I see God coming to me in the midst of whatever I'm going through, whether it's a high part or a low part? It's just about developing that deepening relationship with Christ in the midst of everyday life.
Yeah. And I will disclose, I am one of his clients. I remember we were sitting in Ribbon's attic having a beer during COVID.
Yeah.
And you're like, I'm doing this thing called spiritual direction. I think you were taking classes.
Yeah.
And you needed some guinea pigs to spiritually direct. And I was like, I don't know what that is, but I'll do it. I'm in. And must have been 2020. So that was going on 4 years ago.
Yeah.
And I see you once every month or two. It's not, it's not every week or anything, but it's been tremendously helpful. It's been I've got the nutty thing going on. I've got the crazy family stuff all the time, and spiritual direction. I like how you put it. It kind of forces me to be present, even if it's just for the hour that we're sitting together. But a lot of times we'll be here, and we did this a few weeks ago, and I just remember the mama bird feeding her baby birds at the nest right on top of Danielle there, and just I don't know, just something about just slowing down, putting my phone away if I can.
Yeah.
A couple weeks ago, I had drivers on the road, including your son. I'm I have to have my phone here in case there's an issue, but just to be able to be present, slow down, ask yourself what is God trying to show you in this moment? Why are you on this journey, or whatever, has been more helpful in my life than I would have thought it would be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it really is a ministry of paying attention. And the hope is that when you pay attention long enough, you begin to see God's work in the midst of the everyday, ordinary life, whether it's a busy season or a season that's less full. You can really begin to develop a deeper friendship with Jesus, and the fact that you're paying attention to the things that you're paying attention to, the things that you're paying attention to, and inviting Christ into that, which for me, I just think that's really important. I think too, one of the things that's an important thing to just reiterate is it's not about fixing problems. It's not about finding the
no nothing's been fixed.
Yeah, nothing gets fixed, but it is lovingly brought into the presence of Christ. And and I think that in and of itself is just part of realizing that God is at work in all the areas of our life, whether it's a really big thing or a really small thing. He's doing stuff. He's always working. And I think that's I had a friend of mine when I was going through a certification program. He had this great theological affirmation. He said, "I believe that God is always only, or is always ever only redeeming."
Mm.
And so his idea was that whatever is happening in life, I'm going to choose to believe that God is redeeming something, or there is an opportunity for redemption to take place in that. And I think there's biblical truth behind that, and I think that's a really important thing to be thinking of. Yeah, yeah,
I think too with what you said about like inviting Jesus in. I think so many times I'll be wrestling through numbers or nutty related logistics or like whatever it is, and kind of bring it before the Lord, and find like he's already there.
yes,
Like I'm not so much inviting him in as I am like opening my eyes and being like,
yes,
he's been present here the whole time.
yeah,
And like something I need to remind myself regularly is like the Lord is in charge of nutty novelties. He's in charge of my life. He's in charge of nutty novelties. I'm blessed to be able to steward this thing, and for some reason, He's appointed me in this role with this business and these people and everything. But like He's still in charge, and that's the best news ever. I
yeah,
literally have felt like a weight almost fall off my shoulders sometimes, and I remind myself that, and I'm like, all right, the pressure doesn't need to be all that I'm making it to be. Like I'm not in charge. I'm the steward. Anyway.
yeah,
Thank you, man.
yeah,
Thank you for helping me
absolutely.
see that kind of thing. So back to like starting this thing, like you've been doing bending branches for 3 years now, 4 years.
3 years, yeah,
So
yeah,
what prompted it in the first place?
yeah,
Was it like a calling? Was it a financial thing? Like
yeah.
what was that like for you?
So originally it was my tax guy saying, "Hey, it's great that you're getting these, like, 'cause I was doing some coaching and some spiritual direction, kind of a side hustle for a friend of mine. Um, and that was really great. But my tax guy was like, "Hey, it'd be great if you had like an LLC that you could kind of funnel all this stuff into." And I started thinking more about like that. That was sort of the impetus of starting Bending Branches. I'm like, yeah, I kind of need a bit of a catch-all. But what was really interesting is for the last like 4 or 5 years, there was this idea of just, Lord, I'm a pastor. That's my day job. I'm a pastor. For the Renew community in Lansdale, not the one in Percy. The one that he goes to, not
The good one,
Jesse. Yes,
not
the good one.
Jesse.
But yeah, so I'm a pastor, and that's my primary calling. That's what I do. But there was this dream of what would it look like for me to walk alongside pastors and people in a very intentional relationship around spiritual direction. And so yeah, after having those conversations with Mayor, going through the spiritual direction training, I was like, I feel like it's good for me to just start a spiritual direction practice, see where it goes, see how it goes. I think the really cool part is I just felt really affirmed along the way. As I talked to people that knew me well, they continued to affirm, like, yes, we see this. This is such an important thing. We see the calling that you have in that. And so in 2022, 2021, I was actually out on my paddleboard at Peace Valley Park. And I'm like, Lord, what do I call it? What do I do with this? Like, there's all this stuff. And I felt like there's something about being in the water and just paddling and just watching all these trees sort of bending into the water. Um, and I just thought, man, I think I just want to call it Bending Branches, because this idea of like we are bending our life towards Jesus, like we're bending our whole of who we are into that place where God is at work. And so, yeah, that's kind of where the name came from. And then the business aspect, I had no clue. Like that was amazing. I felt like I was talking to someone with totally different languages. They're like, well, did you, well, you probably have to start an LLC. And I'm like, like, what does that mean? I'm trying to figure that out. So it was great because I actually connected with like Jason Cortazzo, who's a local business owner, yourself, a few others. And I got I had to contact a lawyer to set up an LLC. Like all that stuff was just very foreign to me. Like I had no idea that this was actually a world. I felt more like Michael Scott in that like I declare bankruptcy thing. Like, is that how you do that? Like, I shall start a business, and here it is.
Good.
And so it was really good to be able to have some people that were already doing it that could help me kind of figure that out. And so I think early on the vision was, how do I just grow this very small short thing, or this small thing that's going to be a blessing to pastors and leaders and really any person that's looking for spiritual direction. And that's the cool thing is it's just grown since it started. Started out with my guinea pig and one other guy that were my first two people, and then we're serving over 20 folks right now, all over the country, which is really cool. And people are yeah just growing in their relation with Christ, and it's been really
It's
really cool
awesome.
to see. So yeah, in a few years we've kind of upped, yeah, and it's just been really good to be part of that journey.
And I feel like I get excited when things really fit together in a way that makes sense. And like you doing spiritual direction got me excited because even like as soon as I knew what that was,
Right.
I was like, that makes so much sense. Doug is such like, and maybe you don't even feel this way, but I look at you as somebody who is grounded and present, and maybe that's something you have to work towards. You know, it looks very natural to me. I admire you a ton in that.
Thank you.
And like, so you doing something to kind of coach other people along in that way, I just felt like made so much sense. And then when you told me the name Bending Branches, I'm like, I get it.
Yeah.
I get it. It makes perfect sense. I never knew the Peace Valley thing,
Yeah.
but totally makes sense. So yeah, that was just like so exciting to me. And my second thought was like, I really hope he doesn't leave us at
Yeah.
Renew. We can't go through another pastoral transition now, but
Yeah. Well, and
it's exciting for you.
I think that was a struggle because and I think many entrepreneurs usually start their thing having a full-time job, right? Like they're
Yeah, I
full-time
did. Yeah.
somewhere and then they start this thing and they're like, "Oh man, I'm super pumped about this." And honestly, when I was in that process of starting the business, in my heart, I thought I can't do both. Like
Mm,
I love this spiritual direction thing and I feel really called to it, and I love this thing and feel called to it. And it felt like they were two very opposite things to me, which in
mm,
some ways was probably just where I was personally at the time. And then I had this amazing conversation probably 3 months into that discernment process of like, do I transition? Do I not? And it was just internally, it wasn't this thing that I was processing out loud. But I had a conversation with Beth, a lady at our church, and I realized that I showed up for a Renew thing fully as like a spiritual director, who also happens to be a pastor, or a
mm,
pastor who happens to be a spiritual director. And then it just clicked. And I had this feeling of, oh, I don't have to choose one or the other in this world that I'm in right now. I can actually be both of them. And I see them more as a collaboration
mhm.
than I do as like these two very different things.
Yeah.
And and I think, but still it is a challenge. Like as Bending Branches grows, it does make me ask the question of like, okay, how many can I take on and still continue to be faithful in my role
Yeah.
as a pastor at Renew?
Yep.
And so I'm not at that capacity yet. I don't know what that capacity would be. But it is also just, yeah, it's, I think that's just part of the challenge of like in those moments, like some people start a entrepreneurial business and they just work their day job and do that at nighttime for the rest of their lives. And other people sort of look at that transition. I've kind of held it very loosely,
Yeah.
where it's like, Lord, I want to be faithful in both of these things because I feel like they really speak well to one another.
Mm.
And so I think having them both together is a helpful thing.
I'm always curious about people's like work life balances
Yeah.
too. So like taking those two things plus being a husband and a father of two kids, um, master fly fisherman,
Right. Right.
master grillsman,
Yes.
um, like everything else. Do you feel like it's hard to strike balance? And I
Um.
know you take Sabbath very
Yes.
seriously too.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like my first church that I worked at, the first pastor I was under was a bit of a workaholic. And then the second pastor that I worked under was just he was a very well, healthy, balanced person. And he gave me this great line. He said, your home is your first parish.
Mm,
He said, someday you're going to leave this church, and guess what? Your family's going to go with you.
mm,
And outside of that, probably not a lot of people.
mm,
And I think that has really helped me recognize balance. Like I think about the epitaph, like the funeral thing, when you die, what do you want people to say? It's like, man, I want my wife and kids to be like, he loved us well. He provided. Like that's the most important thing for me. Like that's the win.
Yeah.
And then like the pastoral stuff and all those other things come underneath of that. And so I feel like the challenge part is as a pastor, there is always stuff that comes up, and it feels like in some ways it's always in my brain. And so Sabbath is one of the really important things. Like I have to find a day a week where I don't do work stuff. My phone's off. I'm either fishing or paddleboarding or going for a long walk with Mare or cooking good food on the grill or just doing something that's very intentionally different. I usually take naps on Sabbath, so I try to just rest really, really well. And I think that that helps me to be more present in the rest of life. But yeah, I think balance is really hard more seasonally. Like a couple of years ago, my kids are older now. My son's 19; he's in college. We'll call him Russ so we don't get Caleb and Caleb mixed up. But Russ is in college, and
They changed their own son's name.
it was so much fun. Um, and so his life's different, and like he's home right now over the summer, which is so much fun. And Kylie, she's a sophomore at North Penn, and she's she's busy too. But I remember when our kids were little, it just felt like so much of our life was geared around making sure that they're alive and just doing that kind of stuff. So balance felt really hard to attain when they were little, where I feel like as they're getting older, I'm noticing the gift of time and also the lack of time at the same time. Where like the gift of time in terms of it's so nice to sit down outside with my son, and Kylie on an afternoon when I'm out cooking dinner and just like have a great conversation. Where when they were little, that just didn't happen. It was like, don't touch that, put that down, make sure that's okay. And
That's where I'm at.
that's where you're at.
Yeah.
And so it felt like even a rest day for us as a family when we were younger was hard.
Yeah.
But all that to say, I feel like each season we were able to strike balance, and sometimes balance from when our kids were little looked a lot different than balance right now.
Yeah.
Where now it's like it is not answering emails or phone calls after 6 p.m. on any given day, and making sure that nothing happens on my Sabbath, on my day off.
It's important to set up boundaries.
Yeah.
Right? Like
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, especially when you're running your own business, right?
Yep.
Like
the work is just always there.
It's always there. Yeah. There is never enough. I have never actually finished a to-do list.
Right.
It just continues to grow. I mean, like you picked up a to-do list that was crumpled up on the chair.
Yeah.
And you're like, do you need this still? I'm like, no, because I have to rewrite it every couple of days because it just keeps growing.
Which is smart.
But
it stays active.
It does stay active. But I think even as I think about the entrepreneurial side of bending branches, it's like that's the part where I feel like in some ways it's a little bit that's what I love to do. And so I love to be a pastor too, but like when I finish up a spiritual direction call or a spiritual direction conversation with someone, I'm like jazzed. I'm on fire. I'm like, this was so life-giving, so life fulfilling. Like I love this. Where I think the danger is I would find that to like be the thing that I would throw in 100 hours a week and not bat an eye. I'd be like, this is awesome. I love this part. It's just so filling and easy and simple, and like there's not a ton of other stuff that comes with it. It's just fun. Like it feels like calling, it feels sacred, it feels holy, all those things. And it can be challenging then to be like, okay, well, I got to do this thing. Like I got to check on.
I got to go yell at Ben.
I got to go yell at Ben, or no. But like that feels a lot more. There's a heavy, more weighty responsibility to that because it is heavier and a little more weighty because it's a position that calls upon more leadership for me.
Well, something actually I just thought of now is like at least with bending branches, you don't have any employees besides yourself, right? So there's something about that.
It's a beautiful thing.
Versus at Renew,
yes,
you're kind of responsible for the staff there and the elders, and then of course the whole congregation of several thousand people. Way more than Renew and Percy.
All the multiple personalities that we all have. Is that where you're counting now?
But there's something about having to be responsible for people.
Yeah.
Where I can see like doing your own thing, whether that's something spiritual or not, where it's just like it's kind of just like freeing to just like be independent like this.
Yeah.
And I think what you said about like I forget how you put it, but like what my kids say about me at my funeral when they're saying the eulogies and stuff, like, ah, that's convicting.
Yeah.
And I think you've got it dead on. Like, if they tell me I was a great dad and a great husband when I'm not here, who cares how many peanut butters we sold, man? Like, who cares how much money we made? Like, that's what matters, and
Yeah.
that's a really good reminder.
Yeah.
All right, a little bit of a weird one for you,
Love weird
but
questions.
I'm asking this question to everybody in season two. How does your faith inform your journey as a business owner?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think just starting it was a step in faith, first of all. But I would say uh, every day when I pray in the morning, it's always pretty much the same prayer, sometimes in different words. But Lord, bending branches is yours; it's not mine. So this idea of release, um, Lord, would you bring the people that need that that would be most served by the ministry that this is? So, and would you grow it? So, asking for the Lord to just bless that. And then, Lord, would you lead and would you help me follow well? And that to me is like one of the big spaces. Like even building a website was an act of faith because I'm not talented when it comes to technology or figuring out stuff. I can turn my computer on and off, start new Word documents, so even doing some of those pieces have felt like really big spaces of faith. But like even there, it's been really cool because there's been these seasons when I've really sensed as I'm out running or praying, which is kind of the same thing for me at the moment. The Lord will just bring these ideas to mind. Like over Christmas, I sent out a mass email to 20 people who are probably about 35, 40 people over the years that I've known, just saying, hey, if this has been impactful, like think about giving the gift of spiritual direction to someone. And like a few people actually took me up on that. So that felt like where God gave this idea, and I was able to then respond and obey, and then actually collect from that and see people blessed by that.
Mm,
And I think too, like another way that it's also a place of faith is like this is something that just this year has been really important. Like I want to use bending branches as a way to bless other people too.
yeah,
And so it's been really cool writing checks to like, like aid of my church, like to tithe from that. Like that's been a really cool thing to just say, Lord, you bless, and I'm so glad I get to bless my church through this. That's been super cool. That feels like an act of faith. And even just when like I hear of fun things where I can be involved to just like bless someone, it's been really cool to see that as an opportunity to say like, Lord, you've blessed me with with the finances through this, and I want to just be so free and ready to bless other people.
yeah,
And I feel like
definitely.
that's been a cool way of like kind of reciprocating the blessing that I'm receiving and then pouring that back to God in an act of faith. Yeah, so that I think that's another way that I've noticed the faith element. And I think too, just like practically speaking, it's really challenging to grow. For me, it's challenging to find time to actually feel like I could think about the business. I work in the business
Right.
way much more than I work on the business. And that's something you've talked with me
Yeah,
about.
that's true. I'm
And
right there with you.
I think just trying to figure out like what would the next like Lord, what is that next step? And like how do I actually put that time in and what does that time look like? So it's been neat to sort of have that as a area of growth right now where I feel like that's an area of faith for me because I feel like, well, am I actually is this making any difference or am I just like spinning my wheels? And so that has been an area of faith and a area of growth for me too.
Yeah, yeah, awesome. Um, what would you like our abundant crowd of listeners to learn about bending branches that maybe you haven't shared with us already? Actually, let me start.
Yeah.
I guess I already did. It's seriously great. I recommend it to anybody, even if you wouldn't consider yourself a Christian or a person of faith. Um, I think I think it's worthwhile. I think, and I mean that sincerely. And like, I'm somebody who I'm always running. Like, I never take the time to slow down like I should and reflect. And usually that hour will come up, and it'll be like a Friday morning or whatever. And I'm like, man, I could be doing like this, and this, but I told Doug I'll do spiritual direction this week, and then I do it, and I'm like, man, that was like the best hour of my entire week. I needed that more than I realized. I think I said that pretty much every
Every
time.
time.
I needed that more than I realized I did. Like, I'm going too hard, too fast, and this has been grounding, and like, I recommend it to anybody. Bendingbranches.org. Org.
Yeah. .org. Yep. And I would say too, like, spiritual direction changed my life. It saved me from in some ways it saved me from burnout. It saved me from just a life that felt like I was very compartmentalized.
Hmm.
So Owen has been my spiritual director for 5 years, and he has just been such a gift to me. Um, you know, and typically the way it works is it's an hour conversation that happens once a month, and it's been really cool. Like most of my clients are people that I've been walking with for like 2 to 3 years now, which is I think that's kind of the gift of spiritual direction is it's not one of those things that you can just enter into be like, oh, like I'd like to just do this. It's like it as you grow and as you continue in that relationship with the spiritual director, it just gets better and better. And in some ways people will be like, oh, well, that sounds like you're kind of just trying to keep clients for a long time. And I'm like, yeah, completely. But I mean, I will never live life again without having a spiritual director. Like that's just my commitment. I mean, counseling has been really helpful. I've had counselors over the years. I've had coaches. Coaching is really helpful too. Like they're all really good. But for me personally, like I will never do life without having a spiritual director. And you might be like, well, I'm not a pastor, not religious. But like I have clients who are pastors. I have clients who like do sales for like huge companies. I have clients who are entrepreneurs, clients who are stay-at-home moms, like clients who are unemployed trying to figure out what's next. So it's just really cool that it's not just like a particular kind of person, introverts, extroverts, people who are really comfortable with silence, people who aren't comfortable with silence.
The silence component.
And I
Silence
think
component.
that's probably the other thing that's really important is like it really is about developing a life of prayer and prayerful presence. And it takes time to do that, and it's not something that comes natural to most of us who are so connected to our phones and productivity all the time.
Yeah.
But
Well,
yeah.
well put. All right. So one last thing. Tell me about the best peanut butter and jelly you've ever made.
Oh, dude. Well, the best peanut butter. So let me tell you about the best sandwich that I've ever made that I've never actually shared with you.
Oh,
We've talked about it. So, yeah,
for years.
for years, yeah. The it's not jalapeno butter. No, the habanero butter.
Habanero honey
The
peanut butter.
habanero honey peanut butter
My personal favorite.
is also my personal favorite. And so what I do is we take shrimp, we grill it with just a little bit of seasoning, and we get some really good,
Shrimp.
yeah,
Shrimp, you say?
shrimp,
Okay, go on.
really good bread, like rosemary bread or something that's just got like a nice bite to it. Sourdough is great too.
Mm.
We kind of make that. We sort of grill it on each side or just like put it in the toaster oven. We get Thai basil. We get the honey habanero, and we get any kind of jam, like mango jam, orange jam, raspberry, and we put it all together on a sandwich, and like it'll blow your mind. It is so stinking good. But yeah, so honey habanero. But our family, we like just the classic chunky peanut butter is like the way that we go
Well, I
all the time.
distinctly remember bringing a bunch of 5-pound honey roasted peanut butters over here.
We go for I mean, we eat it in 5 pound consumptions. Yeah. Yeah. It's funny because like you'll just see like when you look in my sink, there'll be like every day there's at least 2 spoons. It's like someone's just been like eating peanut butter. So we're like a big heavy protein house, and I think that's actually been it's great because like I kind of shifted diet a couple years back. And so having good sources of protein for me was like huge. Especially as like someone who's lifting every day, running 5 days a week, it's like you have to have it. So I just super love
Would you say the
all
nut
of it.
butters are the biggest part of your life?
I would say it's like the second biggest part of my life. Like Jesus would be first, then nut butters, then my family. Yeah, yeah, that's probably the way I would put it.
Thank you. That's very kind.
Yeah,
You heard it
yeah,
here
you
first,
heard it
folks.
here. Yeah.
5-pounders now available on nuttynovelties.com.
Called the Doug sized.
Doug. Oh man, yeah, you've been telling me about that sandwich for years, and I don't know what I don't know how many
dude,
Bending Branches sessions I need to get booked for before I get one of those sandwiches in my mouth.
We also put some of the honey habanero on ribs a few weeks ago, and it was awesome. Just a FYI. So
I live like 15 minutes away.
I know
I could be here.
you could.
In a
I should have
minute.
called you. I was just so busy with spiritual direction that day. Man, I should probably call Caleb.
Oh my gosh. Well, dude, thank you for doing this with us
Yeah, man.
today. I love what you're doing. I love Bending Branches. I love that it's helping support you to purchase more nut butters.
Yes.
And thanks for lending us your family to work for us. And
Is Mare the only person who has not worked for you guys?
my wife. I
Yeah.
was just thinking that. I really.
Okay. We
She's
should
next.
probably hire her at
She's
some
next.
point, John.
I
You
gotta
should
get
hire
her.
Yeah.
You know, I'm gonna need a driver in a month.
Oh yeah. I think she just quit her job and do
I
that.
agree. Can
Yeah.
we just do that?
Yeah.
But yeah, thank you guys. This has been the Nuttycast. Oh. You've listened to the other episodes, right?
Yes.
All of them.
Yes.
And as always, stay nutty.
Sorry. Let me do that again.
And as always, stay
Stay nutty.
nutty.